Welcome to the Zweig Letter Podcast, putting architectural, engineering, planning, and environmental consulting advice and guidance in your ear. Zweig Group's team of experts have spent more than 3 decades elevating the industry by helping AEP and environmental consulting firms thrive. And these podcasts deliver invaluable management, industry, client, marketing, and HR advice directly to you, free of charge. The Zweig Letter Podcasts, elevating the design industry one episode at a time.
Hey folks, it's Randy Wilburn here with the Zweig Letter Podcast, and today we are diving deep into the future of architecture and engineering firm management with Robert Yuen from Monograph and Mark Zweig from Zweig Group. Robert, as a leader in practice management technology, along with his team, is reshaping how small and mid-sized firms operate, compete, and grow. And fresh off a significant round of funding at Monograph and the release recently of groundbreaking industry benchmarks, Robert is here to share some insights on the evolving landscape of the AE firm operations and how technology is transforming the way firms it's transforming the way firms work. So without further ado, I want to welcome Robert Yuen and Mark Zweig to the Zweig Letter Podcast. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Doing good. I'm excited to be here. What an intro.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. And I'm so glad you didn't say AEC.
No. Well, I mean.
So anyway,
yeah,
it's always fun to be with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've actually had a couple of recent episodes that we've had a chance to sit down and do, and you're no stranger to podcasting. So I'm excited to be here with both of you. Mark, a lot of people already know you, so I'm going to let Robert go first. And Robert, I would love for you to give your quick superhero origin story to our audience and just tell them in a Cliff Note version who Robert Yuen is. And then you can dive right into just introducing us to Monograph so that we can have a better understanding of the work that you're doing out there in California.
Man, Randy, I haven't given like a quick intro in a long time. Let's see, where do I start?
Give a long intro then.
I'm going to see if I can tell a story. My parents are Chinese immigrants. I was born and raised in Chicago. We grew up extremely, extremely poor. My dad worked as a Chinese chef. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. I'm the oldest of 3. I have 2 younger brothers. I've always loved architecture. I started off with playing Legos, which I'm sure every architect shares the exact same story. I studied architecture in high school. I learned on the vellum, T-squares, and a trace board. I learned how to draw. I learned how to draft. I had an incredible time in high school. I did incredibly well. So I ended up going to University of Illinois, Chicago, UIC, for my undergrad in architecture. Competed, did really, really well my last senior year. I won an international competition that gave me the opportunity to travel for 11 months backpacking across the world. So I was 21 years old. For almost a year, I visited 21 countries, came back, worked for my professor in Chicago for about 2 years. Then I went to University of Michigan for my graduate degree, Masters of Architecture. Go Blue for all the Michigan fans out there. Ended up staying for a second master's degree at Michigan, focused on robotics and digital fabrication. Came back to Chicago, worked at Skidmore, Owens & Merrill. I had an incredible time working there. I've done work on towers that existed in China, Dubai, Canada. It was a phenomenal time. It was incredibly difficult, but perfect for a young designer. Young love took me to San Francisco. Then I did mostly high-end residential here in the Bay Area. I eventually started a design agency where we mixed design, architecture, and digital product software all together as an agency. Monograph came out of that. All of our friends, all of my spouses of the 3 co-founders are all in architecture. And we realized the common problems are always the same. Don't have visibility into timelines, can't manage fees appropriately. We're always working up until the last minute. And then the firm's profitability was always a little wishy-washy. We set on a path to start solving that problem. Naively, we thought it was easy. 6 years later, I can tell you it is incredibly hard, and we're still working on it. Over the course of the last 6 years, 3 guys who started a business have raised 50 million to date and have grown the business from 3 employees to almost 100. Went from 0 customers to almost 1,800 customers, and they employ over 13,000 architects and designers and engineers. That's about as fast as I can do it without getting into stuff.
That's great. I didn't know all of those specifics. I mean, I knew you were in the Bay Area. I didn't know about the Illinois background, which is really interesting. And I'm sure Mark heard that very clearly because he went to college in Carbondale. So I'm sure he heard that. But you were certainly an underachiever at the University of Michigan, and you kind of propelled that to some significant success. And certainly we know Skidmore, Owings and Merrill and so many other amazing firms that you've been a part of. But I'd love for you maybe just to kind of talk about, you mentioned several of the pain points, but what was the one glaring pain point for you that most small to medium-sized design firms were struggling with that you said, hey, if we create Monograph, or if we can build Monograph out, we can really solve this problem more than any of the other problems that I see in design firms?
I've used an analogy I've shared with a few others in the past. I'm going to try it again. I think running a practice or design project, they're almost one and the same. It's kind of like driving a car. You have a destination you have to get to, and you're trying to get there. I live in the Bay Area now, so I visit Tahoe quite often. I think for most firms, it's like driving from San Francisco to Tahoe without the gas meter. Obviously, it's going to be incredibly difficult to make a 4-hour journey without a line of sight in terms of how much gas you have. That was the initial idea that we started off with. This is also why time matters so much. It is, at the end of the day, a services business. You need to know where your time goes. You need to know where your time is going. You need to know where your money is going. These are just gauges so that the profession can make really intelligent decisions along the path to your destination, the completion of a project or firm profitability.
Yeah. And, I'm curious, Mark, to get your thoughts, because obviously you've got a few more years in this industry. This has been a problem since the beginning of time with the design industry. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I can add to that. It has been a problem. There's a lot of reasons for it. I mean, tools are one thing. The other aspect of it is just the culture of design firms and the people who run them. They're not all great communicators. They don't, in some cases, hog information. They're afraid of other people who work there to see what fees are or how many hours were allocated. They want to just give little pieces of the assignments out to people. So the tools are certainly important, but it's not the only thing that, I think impacts project management and firm management in these businesses.
You're absolutely right, Mark. This is also where I think tools can impact culture, because we've designed our software in a way where we have to advocate for visibility, communication, and transparency. If we don't do that, the culture will never change. Luckily for me, we run the business here at Monograph, and we can be fairly strong and opinionated in terms of how we build the tool to essentially help the industry get to the next tier of growth. We have to put the past in the past. Fees have to be communicated. Budgets have to be communicated. We're all intelligent professionals across all age groups. Empower the team, and the team will drive success.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. I think it's interesting, back on Robert's background, you worked for a whole bunch of different firms, obviously, looking back.
From the very big to the very small, yes.
That's your history. And I think that's such a great framework. Big companies do certain things well. They tend to be more organized. They have some discipline in some ways that smaller firms don't have. They're not very innovative, though, either. You know what I mean? They don't tend to be the ones that really come up with something new because they've got so much invested in the old way of doing things. Has that been your experience?
I think of innovation as incentives. Are there incentives for a large firm to be innovative? In most cases, not, for the reasons that you've just shared. They have a process in terms of how they run the business. They have to keep the machine and the lights on. It is a well-oiled machine, especially the larger you get, which is also one of the biggest reasons why the larger you get, the harder it is to innovate. I do think innovation typically comes from outside of the larger firms. You have to look at it from first principles. Clean slate.
Yep, you really do. So you got into this software business. Wow. $50 million is a lot of money to raise in outside equity. Do you still feel like you are in control of this creation of yours, or do these
100%.
outside owners now have the wheel? I'm
100%.
just curious. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a version of this business where it can be extraordinarily large, no different than like a Salesforce or a Meta or an Amazon. I think it can be extremely impactful and be a very large business and help a lot of architects and engineers execute on their work. And to build that vision, there's no way I'm going to be able to do it alone. I need the capital and I need partners to help me along the way. It's incredibly important, but I am absolutely in control.
That's great that you can say that. I think now, obviously when you raise the capital, it has a big impact on the business. If you've got a proven concept and you've got customers or clients and you've shown that you can actually, run and grow the business before you go out for the money, it's a lot better than it is. Yeah, that is. Like, I've got this idea, and it's like before you're out of the gate, you're done.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, it can be a big business. I mean, Deltek, they grew like crazy. I mean, I used to know all the guys at Harper and Schumann and BST and Semaphore and all of them. Those were all the earlier players. I guess Harper and Schumann was probably the first one out there. And they all ended up being part of Deltek, I guess. I don't know about BST. Are they still in business? Do you know?
I don't know.
They must not be. They must be gone. So it's great. You guys came in. You've got perspective based on being insiders in the industry, actual real practitioners. Gosh, I think that's so important as opposed to just being software people.
I don't think you can solve this problem by just being software people.
Yeah.
There's too many intricacies. As you know, the workflows are extraordinarily complex. There's a lot of stakeholders. The process is completely difficult to navigate. It's a really hard problem. It's not an easy problem. You should not take that lightly. And I think without industry knowledge, it's incredibly difficult to solve. Incredibly difficult.
So what do you think makes your solutions, and I hate to use that term, I hate all cliches. So even deep dive, sorry, Randy, I don't even like to deep dive in anything. But it's what makes it different from the other products that are out there on the market? How have you guys been able to come into this where there were a lot of established providers and build a company that's already got 100 employees serving this vertical market?
Well, I think who leads the business matters because that resonates across the entire business. Obviously, I'm an architect. I lead the business. I'm the CEO. And that drives an internal culture that we are on a mission. And I think when you don't have that, everything just kind of falls apart a bit. The passion and the fire just isn't there. And if it isn't at the top, it's definitely not at the bottom. That is what I've learned so far that's absolutely true. The second thing is I think all the legacy players really just focus on making a lot of money because they're industry outsiders. So naturally speaking, where they're going to go to try to make the most money is to go to the largest firms. To make large firms can pay more money. They're going to solve the problems for the large firms first. I just think that's a fundamentally flawed mistake, considering that 90 to 95% of the entire industry is small and medium-sized businesses. Like, if you really want to drive impact, which, like I said, goes back straight to the top, why would I only focus on 10% of the industry? I have to focus on the larger part of the industry. So we're going to start where there's a lot of small businesses. We're going to start with empathy and care and on a mission. We're going to build a world-class product that prioritizes representation of financial insights first, because that's really, really difficult. Architects and engineers are visual professionals. It's very difficult for this industry to just look at a table or an Excel spreadsheet to understand a business. You have to make it visual. That is an exercise in and of itself. And that's where we start. And I think by building the business this way, the market and the industry starts to recognize and the market pulls you.
Makes a lot of sense to me. And I agree that having somebody who's passionate about the business, the industry that you serve is a really important thing. It's like I'm a car guy myself, Robert, and motorcycle guy. There's a great book out by Bob Lutz. He was on the boards of GM, BMW, Chrysler, and Ford. And he's called Maximum Bob. He's still alive. He's about 93, lives in Michigan. outside Detroit. But anyway, Bob's book was Car Guys versus Bean Counters. And the whole, thesis of it is that the auto industry declined because the car people, quote unquote, are no longer at the top. They got bean counters and brand managers, and as opposed to people that actually understand, cars. It's kind of like that with you guys. I also think it's interesting too. I found that like even in our business, whenever the big players decide they're going to build a consulting business that serves the industry that we do, I used to get like every year I'd have like all of a sudden, Anderson Consulting or Accenture or whomever sends like two guys in to see me. They're both highly educated MBAs from Wharton or somewhere. We're going to start a consulting business and we're going to go after the AE market, but we're not interested in the companies you guys work with. We only want the top 10 or top 20 companies. It's always their approach. And then what happens usually is they don't succeed. If they do, it's rare. They usually give up, but that's where they think the big money is. But it's harder to serve this fragmented audience like you serve. All these little companies, the reason these companies don't go after them is there's a lot of time investment and marketing cost and effort in order to build a brand and a business around serving all these little customers.
I have a personal saying that I say to myself and say to my internal team is whatever is the hardest path is probably the path we should be on. I'm really, really excited because the hardest path is also the least traveled.
That's a good point. I agree with that. It's, the other thing is though, back in, sort of the architecture and engineering world, when it comes to the financial performance of projects, seems to me like I worked with a lot of companies over the years and they would do these studies. I haven't seen this recently, but I used to hear this all the time. Well, we've done a study and we've determined, Robert, that we can't make any money on a job with a fee of less than $5,213. Therefore, we no longer do projects with fees of less than $5,214. And I always thought that is such a stupid approach because if you're really going to serve your clients, you got to do whatever it is they need.
No.
You can't always make the decision based on profitability. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's important for a firm to be profitable. Let's make that really clear, Mark. Like there is no business if a business is not profitable. So
Don't disagree.
So that's absolutely important. I do think.
But the business has to be profitable. That's the difference. Not necessarily every single project. The fallacy in the thinking is that, well, if every project's profitable, the firm's profitable. Yeah, I guess that's true as long as your overhead is calculated properly, right?
Well, that part. Well, if you're calculating true profit, then it should be. It should
right.
Be.
But it's the company that we care about, not just the individual project.
My general advice, without being specific in terms of what the project is or who the client is, because those variables are going to have to be taken into account as you make your decision. But I think it's more important to not go straight into logic so quickly. For example, the minimum viable project is 5,200, as you said. This project will not be, so we're not going to do it. I think it's much more exciting to ask the question was like, well, okay, this project can't be more than 5,200. I know historically I couldn't achieve that mark profitably. How can I and should I revisit the processes that are internal to essentially get us there? Like, I think that's a much more intelligent and intellectually stimulating conversation. It's like, I know, well, this is a lot easier to problem solve, right? Like I have a fixed number, 5,200, that's not going to move.
Right.
A process that doesn't serve it, great. Not great, but at least I know where the problem is. Let's figure out what's the right way to achieve success in projects of this size. Because I would like to try to have every project be profitable. And for that to apply, sometimes processes don't scale. So
I am so glad you said that.
Like I said, like it's about being problem solvers first, which is most architects and engineers are really good at. Like, be a problem solver. You obviously have a problem. Identify where the problem is and work on it. Don't just disregard it and move on like that. And also don't accept the fact that you're just going to not be profitable. Like that's like, you should stop doing that too.
Yeah, amen to that. I mean, I used to teach a class called Everything They Don't Usually Teach You in Architectural School here, fifth year students. And one of the things I did was bring in very successful architects, people who make $5, $10 million to $15 million a year.
Yeah.
And because I felt like so many of the professors they had basically told them they have to take a vow of poverty to be in this business. I'm like, that's because they're crappy architects and business people. Don't listen to them, okay? That's a totally dysfunctional model. You can be successful in this business. I think a lot of people don't even believe that, though, don't you?
I think a lot of people don't believe it. I believe it, which is why we're building Monograph here, and this is why we'll continue to advocate for it. I think it's very simple, generally speaking, for most of the profession to acknowledge that as you grow your firm, your previous processes don't scale as you scale up. Everyone kind of understands that concept. I think everyone forgets that sometimes you might have to scale down from a process to make things work too. It goes both ways. It's a two-way street.
Absolutely.
So if you know that a project is not going to be profitable because it's on the smaller end, your process is probably a little bit too heavy. And you're going to have to reevaluate what are the appropriate processes and team size and protocols that are needed to execute on a smaller budget.
That's a really good point. And, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to jump in on that. Another thing I found over the years is when I'd be talking with companies about their business and their projects and what they do, and I would ask them, what do you think is an average size project for your firm? I would always get these numbers of, 100,000, 200,000, whatever. And then when I actually did a dump of all their jobs, all their open job numbers, I always found out you guys are so far off. You don't even know what you're talking. Your average job is like $14,000. It was always smaller than they thought.
Of course.
And so then the process, as you said, is designed to do the mega jobs. And it just doesn't work when you try to do the jobs. So what happens? People just don't do certain steps. They're just like, throw that out. But they decide what steps they're going to throw out instead of you as management really figuring out what that process needs to be to do the smaller job. And of course, that's a disaster then. That's where problems happen.
I'm so excited because I think like these problems they're actually not the hardest problems in the world. We're not trying to figure out how to build an autonomous robot. We're not trying to figure out how to come into space. We're not trying to figure out AI. Like we can solve these problems. Like all I need the grit. I need the passion inside me. I need a little bit of time. I need a little bit of money, and we'll get it done.
So back on Monograph. Sorry, Randy.
No, I'm just a fly on the wall here listening to both of you guys talk. And it's actually enriching because there's a lot of really good advice coming out of this conversation. I did want to kind of guide the conversation a little bit more for Robert to share, just because you alluded to it, but what are some of the recent released industry benchmarks and surprising findings that you guys have found at Monograph that has really kind of helped you focus on how you're going to serve your client?
It's a really, really good question. For everyone to know, I think this is the way we're doing our benchmark report. I think it's one that I'm incredibly proud of. One, because it comes from real data. It's not surveys. It's anonymized data from our customers so we can really understand the trend, the progress, and the gaps within the industry. I believe surveys are extraordinarily biased and really, really hard to get the right leading indicators in terms of like what is accurate and what's not. What we found so far that's fascinating is like every customer that starts on Monograph over the course of the next 12 to 24 months, they're extremely more profitable once they adopt our system full end to end, where they're essentially tracking time all the way to invoicing. Their time to payment reduces, their utilization rates increase, their realization rates increase, and everyone's familiarity with financial literacy also increases, which I think is really, really important, especially if you're a business owner, to have a certain level of financial literacy outside of just design literacy or practice literacy. We've also seen salaries grow. We've seen that profit from firms roll back into the organization, so headcount grows and the average salary increases. We've also discovered that at some point, the salary of the principal and the owner starts to plateau. And the biggest driver for, let's say, revenue back into ownership is profitability. It's at the end of the year, what is the margin left between what it costs for you to operate the business and what you netted out. These are incredible findings that we found this year, and we'll continue to do the report every year to hold ourselves accountable as our data set increases. And we do our best to disclose to the industry what we see through our customer base.
I think that's very valuable information. I agree with you. The fact that you've got the actual info there instead of surveys. The only thing I'll say about surveys, though, I'm not as down on them as you are, because, people would say like, well, 200 people responded to this. Who says that's representative? I'm like, would you rather have 0 people or 200 who are actually doing it? I mean,
that's true.
It's like we're not making life and death decisions based on information. So, some information is better than none. But I agree, if you can get actual data based, you see coming through your users because you've got their accounting information, that's very valuable and meaningful. It should be.
My only concern is sometimes the surveys are, let's say, surveyed primarily targeted towards the larger enterprise firms, and the representation of that survey is industry wide. I was like, that's not
sure.
Right? Like you're surveying, let's say, of the 200 firms that you went to go survey, 190 of them are enterprise. Like you have a very good understanding of what the enterprise space looks like, which operates substantially different than the S&P. There are projects that only enterprise companies can do. This goes into like large campus build, master plans, big buildings, big projects.
Sure.
A small and medium-sized business mostly focus on residential and local commercial, lightweight commercial. Like it's just not a fair representation.
No, I would not disagree with that. I mean, if you take Zweig Group as a model, or as somebody that does a lot of surveys, if you look at what we're doing, it's because that's not our target market. The small firms we know that the people who buy the most stuff from us, our primary customer base is probably companies with somewhere between 100 and maybe 3,000 or 4,000 people. Are there those that have less that do work with us? Of course. Are there those bigger? Of course. But if you look at like the core business, they're big enough to afford us, but they don't think they know everything. Once they get to a certain size, like, oh, we've got this development department that handles all our M&A, or whatever, they don't feel they need you. So to a certain extent, in our case, and I'm not being defensive about surveys, don't get me wrong, but we aim at the market that we serve. And it's not all 5-person firms that are going to AIA meetings. And, but you make a really good point. And I think having that information that you have, I've always told people that as you grow, it's easier to pay yourselves better. And if you look at salary surveys, basically every position in the firm does better as the firm gets larger.
Yes.
Speaking, yes. There really is.
Money solves a lot of problems.
There is sort of a general pattern there that doesn't surprise me. But so back on, though, things you said their cash flow improves. What is it? Because of their financial literacy that is improving? They understand how critical that is to working capital, or what do you attribute that to?
So, like I said, when we started off, we can be extraordinarily opinionated. So I would call this like the Monograph method. There's a few principles that are part of that Monograph method. The first one is you got to stop logging time once a month or once a week. We can't remember what we did a month. I can barely remember what I did 2 days ago if we break it down to like projects and tasks. You have to be tracking your time. No different if you were like going to the gym and you do it on the day of.
You put it in the phone? Are you guys phone oriented? Your time tracking?
We have an Apple app and we have an Android app. You have to be.
You got to be.
Time tracking has to be on a daily interval so we can be as accurate as possible. That experience has to be so enjoyable that the industry doesn't mind. Because everyone knows that they don't like tracking time. So we have to make that experience so delightful that you want to. And so we spend a considerable amount of energy making sure that experience is world class.
I just want to ask you one question about that, though. And you can come back to your second point. So do you find that when it comes down to defining various ways to categorize one's time, that those categories are poorly designed in firms such that the individual who's entering their time can't make a decision on where that time goes? Like it could go to 5 different things.
Yeah.
They're not mutually exclusive. Where do I throw that time? You
Less
find that?
more. Less is more.
Yes.
The less options you have, the more likely you'll get it accurately attributed to. Luckily, being in the small and medium-sized business, we generally see more firms with less categorizations than more categorizations. If a firm does come into Monograph a lot, the first thing we remind them is Mies van der Rohe, less is more. We want to be very designed appropriately for the scale of the business. You don't need a lot if you're still small, and will scale proportionally as the business scales. But always remember, simplicity means way better success. Less is more.
Amen to that.
If your team is telling you, or if you're the firm owner and you're finding that there's a ton of miscategorizations, become the designer or become the doctor. These are symptoms of a problem. Simplify it. It's probably over categorizations, and you can probably group a lot and get it back down to less is more.
So sorry, I interrupted you. What was the second point that you wanted to make back there?
I wanted to bracket the 2 endpoints. One is tracking time, and the other point is actually getting paid. So historically, the industry gets paid based on, I'm generalizing here because I know there's a lot of micro scenarios, but generally speaking, based on phase
Right.
completion. The problem is your rent, your payroll, your insurance, everything else in life happens on a monthly cadence.
Mm-hmm.
You should get paid on a monthly cadence. If you want to really understand your cash flow,
Amen.
and cash out, obviously you have all your cash out happening once a month, your payroll, your utilities, your rent, everything else in life. You have to essentially adjust how you invoice your clients down to a monthly interval. And by doing that, Monograph, we make it really, really easy. It also makes it really predictable for your end client.
Yeah.
You get an invoice from my architect every single month. It's going to roughly be the same. I like that. Kind of like a very expensive Netflix account.
Makes sense, though. Yeah, I agree with that.
Predictability helps a ton in terms of running a business. It also removes the ambiguity of when is truly a phase complete. Well, like who's the arbiter of 50% complete? Who's the arbiter of 25% complete? If you start negotiating this with your client, obviously it's not very clean and cut.
Or you make that decision internally and your revenue accrual is wacky because I think I'm X percent done and you say I'm not.
Correct.
Yeah. So a huge problem.
For smaller businesses, this is like the historical standard.
Yeah.
For smaller businesses, this is also what happens. You run out of cash before you get paid. So you'll take out loans, you take out line of credits, you float. Essentially, that's the financial terminology. You float your cash balance until you get paid. And you know you will get paid because the client relationship is there.
Mm-hmm.
The entire problem is that your internal operating process is a little bit off sync. You need to be operating at a much tighter cycle, ideally monthly, no later than 2 to 3 months. Anything that looks like 6 months or more, my first advice to that firm owner is like, we got to change this. Like either you have a really large piggy bank so you don't have a problem. That could be the case. But if you don't have a large piggy bank, then we got to get your billing cycle a lot tighter. By doing that, which is fascinating, there's a lot of trickle down influences. Mm-hmm. You're going to run the business a lot tighter now because all the information is happening a lot sooner. I was like, oh, I know exactly at the end of the month how much I spent. I know exactly how much I'm going to collect. You start to essentially calibrate much faster and you get a much more attuned understanding of your own business because the things are there much more immediate. These are all the byproducts of one, a great process, great software, and us being fairly heavy-handed that we're going to build it in a way to ensure that you drive success.
That makes so much sense to me. I completely agree with you, and it makes so much sense. It's a little bit analogous to the idea that I always said bootstrapped companies end up being better companies later than those that start out with a big pot of money because they develop the discipline in their processes to, faster billing, faster collection, all the things that allow you to have the working capital to operate that you don't have, So it's kind of like that is what you're saying. And it makes a lot of sense. You do see some companies that sit on a whole bunch of money. I've worked with some clients like that. I've got one that just honestly, they probably have half a year's worth of cash sitting there in the bank and no debt. And it's crazy though, because then they're not using their money wisely. They shouldn't have all that money in there. They should extract that and do something else with it.
Well, it depends on the owner's ambition. Right? If the ambition is not there, then more than likely you're not going to use it. But if the ambition is there, then it's kind of straightforward. Like you use it to grow the business, get more work, grow headcount, level up your talent, right? Like you're going to have to need to deploy that cash to grow the business.
What do you think about the design firms out there? You have a zillion small design firm users, right? What do you think about those that say, well, Robert, we really don't want to be more than a 10-person company. I like 10 people. 10 people's great. I'm going to be 10 people until I decide to retire. And then I'm going to come in one day and just lock the door, and don't want anybody else using my name either, by the way, if I'm not the one designing everything. What do you think about that? I mean, do you tell people the fallacy in that thinking, or do you just let them go on like that?
Well, no, I tell them I want to make you the best damn 10-person firm ever. Mm-hmm. Like my job is not to tell you what your dreams are. Your job is to tell me what your dreams are, and my job is to help you get there. So if your dream is to be a 10-person firm, have incredible work-life balance, and run it to the day that you hang your hat up, well, let me help you. I actually think, Mark, there's a need in this country to have a lot of those firms. At the end of the day, they design our fire stations or police stations or schools or libraries or parks or residentials or homes, the multiplex across the street. Like these are the firms, the 10-person firms, the 5-person firms, the 15-person firms that design the neighborhoods that we spend a considerable amount of our time living in and enjoying those spaces. They're incredibly important. I want to empower them. I want to make sure that they stay in business. I want to make sure that they don't worry about their financials. And I want to make sure if that's what you want, I'm here to help.
That's interesting. I mean, I agree with you. We do need small firms. I guess my only problem, though, with that thinking is who is really good? If you're a strong architect, do you want to work in that firm where the owner comes in every day and says, I don't want to be more than 10 people. I'm not going to sell any ownership. I don't want anybody to ever use my name, but I want you to work here for the rest of your life, Susie, and do a great job and work your ass off. I think it's an unrealistic view of the way it's going to go. Because what I see those guys do is they have that small firm. They suck all the money out of it. They exploit people who work there as long as they can. Then those people leave, and then they find some new ones to exploit. Their experience at the below them becomes less and less over time because good people don't really want to work there. And then in the end, they're pissed off when they come to us and they go, I want to sell my firm. What do? We design churches, schools, houses, retail, everything. And by the way, I've got nobody who can take over, and I'm 72 years old now. But I want you to go out and get me a good price for my company I've worked 50 years to build. I think it's unrealistic.
There's a lot in that statement where I would disagree.
Okay, what's that?
I think there's good people across every segment of the industry, from the very small to the very big. The easiest comparison that I can make outside of just the architecture industry is like restaurants. Do I want to eat at a McDonald's or Benihana's all the time? Big corporations. No. Like I want a person who understands me, who has passion at a different scale. And I appreciate that. And I think there's a need in the market.
There is. I don't disagree with you. I use those people. Yeah. I mean, it's just the problem is, can you say, I mean, they're all going to be, if they start out, they're all going to be there initially, right? Mm-hmm. And then some evolve past that, some don't. I guess my point is, I agree with you 100%. Like if I'm going to need help with a 10,000 square foot office building, I'm not going to go call HOK, okay? It ain't going to happen. But how can you go public with that and say, I want to be this size forever? Or is that just a step along the way to having a company that's going to grow and outlive you as the founder?
You ever hear of this company called Square or Toast?
Sure.
Our mind body, well, they serve small businesses and they're incredible. They're large publicly traded businesses and they're very, very big. And I believe I can get there too.
Well, these architects aren't that, though. They're not going public. They don't have anything that's that valuable. I mean, I guess my whole point is I agree. We need small firms. They serve a great position in the market. I just think it's really hard to say that we're going to stay this size forever. I think that you're not going to be able to keep great people if that's the way you operate. I mean, it's inevitable. I had a client like that years ago. He's a very successful guy. He won all the design awards in his state. Every year, it'd be like, this guy cleans up. Okay. And then, I'm going to stay this size forever. He designed everything. Everybody else is an order taker. And one day, just everybody left. I mean, he had nothing there. He had all these jobs. He had 2 people, like 15 of them left in a really short period of time. And he had to go find another company that he could go to work for to finish, to bring his jobs along to finish them up. And it was just kind of sad. He was very depressed about that. I don't think he really thought about what the long-term ramifications of that strategy or program were going to be.
I think times are changing. And I think with the help of Monograph, we can empower a lot of the smaller owners to have a little bit better line of sight on the decisions they make. It's not my job to say, like, obviously, I'm extraordinarily ambitious and I want my company to be as large as possible.
Right.
But I also have enough empathy that I'm not going to deploy what my wishes and desires on anyone else. My job is here to be of service. If you want to be running an incredible firm at a certain scale, my job is to help you. My job is not also to help you today, but also help you get line of sight of what tomorrow might be.
Well, that makes total sense.
Yeah. If you think about
I can understand.
You want to hang your hat up and you want to sell, well, like we should start having an education around like, well, what does a sell look like? And how soon should you start preparing? It isn't going to happen like overnight. You got to prepare for this.
Exactly.
You also have to have a fair representation of how does the market assess values on a services-based business. And as long as you're prepared, you'll be ready. I think the problem is historically is they weren't prepared. And when you're not prepared, you're not going to be ready. So let's prepare the industry and everyone's going to be in a much better spot 10 to 20 years from now.
Well, and I think it's important to remember that, a company like yours didn't necessarily exist 30 years ago, right? In terms of the way that you deploy your technology and the way that you can surgically reach out to these smaller companies, some of whom, like Mark said, don't always have the vision to see what the long-term effect can be or what, the impact they can make. They're only thinking of it through their role in that organization, in that company that they started. And I think, what I hear you say, you keep saying line of sight. I keep thinking about vision. And sometimes it will take an organization like yours to kind of connect the dots for that small business owner, that small firm architect, that small firm engineer to understand that, oh man, I actually can make something of this long term. And the folks at Monograph have actually helped me do that.
Yeah.
I got another one for you, Robert. I'd like to get your thoughts on.
Fire away.
Okay, because I love the fact that you've got a point of view that you can articulate clearly. What about the woe is me, whining architects, young, they're out there. I work so hard. The boss doesn't appreciate me. There's no work-life balance, yada, yada, yada. I want to work from home, though. I'm not going to do anything extra unless they absolutely force me to. What do you think about that? I mean, it seems to me there's a culture of a lot of complaining and a very negative view of perhaps the career possibilities or opportunities that architecture presents in this younger group of people.
Mark, you have all the spicy topics.
Sorry, I got it. You're a guy I know has got an opinion on this stuff. But that's why I want to ask you.
Yeah, no, this is a very spicy topic, which I love to essentially debate on. Help me drive focus. Do you want my point of view of how I see it as I build Monograph? Or do you want my point of view of how I see the industry and the clients and the customers we serve? Because there's slightly two different point of views.
Yeah, I could guess on what your personal perspective and orientation is. So, I mean, we can talk about that. But no, I think from an industry standpoint, though, as business owners of firms that employ people that have this orientation, how do we, do we allow that? Do we cater to that? Do we try to change their mind? What do we do with that?
So here's how I like to think about problems usually, and like what are in my controls and what are not in my controls. I would like to essentially articulate that there are cultural shifts that happen globally and domestically that happens every so often that like these are the trends of the current times. And when they're trends of that scale and magnitude, I can't control it. What I can decide is how do I participate within that trend? And I think it's really important for me to then give advice to firm owners is like to remind them, this is your firm. You have complete control over the culture and the people you hire and the people you recruit and the people that you attract, right? There's two ways of acquiring great talent is you go after talent, but talent can also come to you. You are in control of that culture that you want to establish. So you make the best decision for your business. And whatever that decision is, my job is to serve you. So like, I'm going to take less of I'm going to play Switzerland here and be like, it's okay, whatever decision you pick. But it's really important that you know that you are in control as a firm owner and you decide the culture that you want to build and then build that culture. Do not waver. Do not compromise. So if you have a strong opinion in terms of the people you want to attract, go get it. And if you have it either way, it can be fairly extreme. If you want everyone in office working extraordinarily hard and extremely motivated, then you go build that business. If you want to essentially build a remote first, everyone distributed across the country and everyone works at very flexible with high degree of, let's say, time off, family time, and work-life balance, go build that. My only ask is like, be committed to the business you want to build because it's your business. Don't ever forget that. That's why you started a business. You are in control. Go to sleep happy. Go to sleep happy.
I love it. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's good. I always tell people too that, you think about it as, especially for younger people, younger design professionals, proximity, there's some power in proximity when you're close. We used to talk about like management by walking around in the 90s and early 2000s. And now that walking around looks a lot different, right? It might mean several video check-ins during the day with, several of your up and coming rising stars. And I think for young professionals, they need to know how best they can develop their skill set by virtue of whether they can receive more virtually, or if they need that face-to-face, kneecap-to-kneecap connection in order to grow in their profession. So yeah, it can be one of those things where individuals can kind of self-select for what works best for them and an environment, a company that allows them to grow in that way. So
this is something that I wish I would give myself feedback if I was a younger designer again. Like, I'm going to be a designer. I'm going to be an employee. I'm applying to jobs. I have to constantly remind myself, I can decide where I want to apply. I can decide where I feel that I'm going to have a good time and it's going to be the best environment for me, no matter what my ambitions, desires, or work ethics or not work ethics, aesthetic or not aesthetics. Like, I get to choose the place where I want to apply. And I should actually hold that to a very high bar. Because at the end of the day, if that two doesn't match, well, that's the beginning of a frustration and a dysfunctional relationship. They just didn't align. The firm has to find the right talent. As an employee, as a young designer, you also have to find the right firm. That has to come together. And when that happens, everyone's happy. The work is going to be extraordinarily good. The cultural environment is going to be extraordinarily the best. When that alignment doesn't happen, that's usually where we hear all the frustrations, either from the employee side or from the owner side, is because like it just didn't match. Whenever I hear that, I also remind firm owners and management that like it's your company. It is also your responsibility.
Yes.
If you see that there's a problem here, you cannot ignore it. Now, how you resolve it, that's still also your choice, but you have to resolve it. And it is your responsibility. If you don't like the responsibility, don't start a firm. Like, that's the weight of essentially being an owner or being in management.
I like your philosophy. It makes a lot of sense to me. I think the problem, though, if there is a problem with it, it's that the young architects have not really been educated properly. They don't really understand the ramifications of one decision or another, or what type of company is good to work in versus what type's not, and what the career path options. If I go to work for a 400-person firm that designs Walmart stores versus the Starkitect 10-person company that wins all the AIA awards in my state. I mean, it's just, nobody's given them the perspective that they need in order to make an intelligent decision like you just put out there. I mean, you're a good example in a way because you worked for so many different companies when you were in school and young that you really developed that perspective probably better than most people would have.
I'm older now, so I have a perspective of current age. I would argue there's probably less of a problem than most people articulate. I have to try to remember when I was 21, 22, and was I confused? Did I make a lot of not so wise decision? Was I a young adult making young adult decisions? Mark, the honest answer is yes. Like, I'm not gonna shy away from it. Like, I don't know what I didn't know, and I made a ton of mistakes along the way. I also think it's sometimes inappropriate to judge the next generation too early because they're just going through a period of time where they're growing and they're trying to figure out. And I think we need also sometimes to remind ourselves that we were that age once and we weren't that wise either. And that's okay. Like, that's kind of life. That's how it works.
Yeah, I don't like to bash the generations at all. That's never been, I think it's terrible when people do that.
Yeah.
Where they the young people don't want to. There's always exceptions. I mean, I'm a professor. I see the whole mix.
Yeah.
I just have highly ambitious ones and ones that aren't that motivated or whatever. So
I remember professors, and there's always a few that are incredible professors that are also life coaches in my mind, where they obviously you still have to teach the curriculum and you're not really fully prepared. Like, the jump between academic and practice is actually a really big jump. And I think the best professors, one, acknowledge it and just gives you a head up. Like, it's not going to be that easy. And, here's your diploma. Have fun. Learn on your way. Be hungry. Don't ever forget that, lifelong learning exists throughout your entire life. It does not stop at the diploma. You'll learn a lot. You'll struggle a lot. You'll make a lot of mistakes. People will tell you that you're doing things right. People will tell you that you're doing things wrong. And that's okay.
I guess one of the things that I do think some of the things that people are taught in architectural school in particular are incompatible with running a good business. I had a young architect tell me, or he was a 5th-year student, tell me once that basically that what we did in my design build firm was all crap because we didn't break any new ground. Okay. We tended to do, you don't know anything about that business I had, but, I was known for being the guy who was very sensitive to the historical aspects of the architecture. I used all original materials. I was all about context and not standing out. And so the student, he's telling me basically I'm a failure because I'm not breaking new ground design wise. Now, if that's the attitude that you go out into the business with, good luck being successful. I think the odds are going to be stacked against you. And so if that's what you're carrying, I just use that as one example of what I would say is sort of dysfunctional thinking that gets people off on the wrong foot and therefore makes it difficult for them to have a successful business at any size in this industry or profession.
Hard for me to assess. I don't know who this person is, but I think it's clear that what that person was looking for and what you were doing did not align. And that's why that conversation happened.
So, man, you guys this has been rich. I want to kind of find a place where we can wrap this up because we could go on and talk about the conversations for days. There's so many nuggets that have come out of this particular conversation. I did want to ask you, because I'd be remiss if I didn't ask everybody that I talk to what they think is the impact of AI specifically. But I would imagine for you guys, as you've got this new round of funding, you have the latest round of industry benchmarks. How are you looking at AI as it pertains to Monograph, right? As opposed to saying, well, what do you think about AI? How are you looking at AI in terms of where is it going to help the most for design firms? And what will that look like potentially for Monograph?
Streamlining and automating workflows. That's where the highest impact is. Imagine having an army behind you that you didn't have, ensuring that the streamline of your processes go a lot faster and a lot smoother. I think we've all, at some degree, have taken a contract and have data inputted into a system to track. And you can imagine that historically someone had to go line by line, column by column, field by field, enter the name, the client, the duration, the phases. That is one example that here at Monograph, you don't have to do anymore. Just upload the contract and our AI will essentially read it and we'll auto parse it immediately, all the information in the appropriate places. And you don't have to go field by field anymore. Not only that, we can look at your resource tab and figure out who's available, give you essentially a draft of a roster of who might make sense to essentially staff the project. Obviously, it's still a draft and you should review it, but we can say based on this calendar, based on this new project, based on these new parameters, based on the categorization of this building type, here are the people that might fit the schedule and the timeline. We essentially took a first stab of drafting out all the people that are available who are appropriate with the right skill sets to go and work on this project. That used to take weeks, right? You have to pull up a spreadsheet, you have to look at your entire team, you have to figure out who's available, who is in between projects, who's in between phases that I can essentially pull to start a new project. This is done in seconds, Randy. I think this is where I'm extraordinarily proud where AI is going to take us, where I think it's actually going to be much more under the hood in terms of how it's going to serve and support the industry versus other industry where it might be much more upfront and obvious. An example would be on the other spectrum of the industry where they're pushing architectural visualizations, 3D rendering. That AI has a hand in that side of the industry as well. And that's much more, let's say, upfront in terms of impact. For us, it's really behind the scenes. And how do we make sure that you click less and we do more?
Yeah. Yeah. And I would imagine, given that you're working probably in helping clients that use Monograph are using the AI within a closed LLM system, the level of hallucinations are probably non-existent.
No, we only use the data that we have to work with. We don't work outside. There's a lot of risk when you start to do that. I think only, let's say, horizontal companies in this context would be like an OpenAI or any of these other companies that serve multiple industries. There's a lot more hallucination because they can't be so verticalized. We're so specific that the way that we can build our software gets extraordinarily catered. I don't care about the other industries. I only care about serving architects and engineers. But that also means that we can be much more specific and much more targeted in the software we build, including the AI that we're continuing to essentially train.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, Robert, this has really been enlightening. I have like a page and a half worth of notes here.
It's been really fun.
I'll be sure to get these show notes out so that people can really appreciate them for this particular episode. If somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to connect with you, to connect with Monograph? And again, we'll make sure all of this is in the show notes, but I would love for you just to share that here while you're here.
My email is really, really easy. It's just robert@monograph.com. If this podcast comes out after AIA, well, then you might have missed me, but I'll be there. I'll be there in Boston in person.
Yeah, it may not be out before AIA, but people will be able to refer to it. And I'm sure that won't be your last trip to AIA. And certainly they should reach out to you if they have questions about Monograph and how it might be able to help them in their particular organization. But we really appreciate you joining us today and spending a little bit of time with us, just kind of sharing a little bit about Monograph and what's going on. And we hope to have you back here soon to talk further about some of the new findings. And maybe we'll have to make an annual thing of talking and discussing the benchmarks, because as we can all acknowledge, with technology and the times, things are going to consistently change over and over again. So what we're talking about now this year will be different next year.
Randy, you've been an incredible host. Thank you for having me. And I hope to be on, because I think like Mark and I can just have enough confidence and banter to actually just treat this like a fireside chat.
Yeah, that's what it was. And Mark is perfect at that. He's got a couple of podcasts that he does. And certainly he and I have been doing this for years now, almost 10 years.
Oh, yeah, you introduced me to this podcasting stuff.
I know. And it's taken on a life of its own. So, yeah.
Yeah. But no, Robert, it's really great to finally get to talk with you. I've been, watching you from afar, and I can see why you're successful. I think you have a really great way of putting things together in a sensible way that people can understand. And I can see that is, I'm sure that thinking has been applied to your products as well. So that's impressive. And it's great to have you. Let's do it again, Randy. Let's have another with Robert.
We will. I'll pencil it in and we'll get something going. And shout out to Chris Morgan also, who works with Robert, who helped pull this together. So
I can't do this without Chris.
Yeah, no, Chris is the man. So we really appreciate him as well. So, but thank you both so very much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Randy.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it, folks. Another episode of the Zweig Letter Podcast. To learn more about Zweig Group, please visit our website at zweiggroup.com. You can subscribe to the Zweig newsletter, which is one of the longest running newsletters in the design industry. It's been around since 1992 and it keeps going strong. And certainly we would encourage you to check that out. You can subscribe to it for yourself. You can also subscribe your whole company to it, and we'll make that work. And a brand new Zweig Letter newsletter comes out every Monday, rain or shine. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and this has been the Zweig Letter Podcast. We'll see you back here soon with another new episode. Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to the Zweig Letter Podcast. We hope that you can be part of elevating the industry and that you can apply our advice and information to your daily professional life. For a free digital subscription to the Zweig Letter, please visit thezweigletter.com/subscribe to gain more wisdom and inspiration, in addition to information about leadership, finance, HR, and marketing your firm. Subscribe today.